They can't lose. They will do anything to win. So how do they do that? They're not going to do COVID again. I know everyone on the right's afraid they're going to do COVID and mask mandate. They're not going to do that. They can't do that. If they've already been exposed, that won't work. There's going to be, no, what are they going to do? They're going to go to war with Russia is what they're going to do. There will be a hot war between the United States and Russia in the next year.
From political controversies to societal issues, Tucker Carlson has a reputation for calling things as he sees them.
He told somebody that I was a Russian agent or something, and I was outraged. So I called him on the phone, and I used bad language. I was really mad. And he said, whoa, I just got that, that's what the intel briefers told me, that you were working for Russia. And I said, that's what the intel briefers told you? You believe your fucking intel brief? Like, how old are you, son? I'm from DC. My dad was in this world. Like, you're being manipulated by your intel briefers. Duh. And he's like, well, they had, all kinds of corroborating evidence. Did you see the evidence that I was a Russian agent? I'm an American. I was born here. I've never lived anywhere else. Pretty patriotic. Like, what an outrageous thing to say. He goes, well, they had, I believe what they, basically, he tells me I believe what they say. And I told him like 5 times. I probably shouldn't be repeating this, but I was thinking about it this morning. Because I just saw that McCall is now sending more money to Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And it's like, why are you doing that? Well, because you're controlled by the intel agencies. That's why. That is true. And I'm just absolutely sick of it. I'm sick of it. I believe my intel briefers. Like, I don't, by the way, I don't think he's dumb enough to believe his intel briefers. I don't think any of these people think they're not being manipulated. They know they're being manipulated. And there are pressure points that can be applied on people. I mean, let's just be totally honest. I'm not, accusing anyone of anything specifically, but if you have a drinking problem or you're not, you have a complicated personal life, and a lot of people do, particularly in DC, you're vulnerable.
Not afraid to tackle tough subjects, Carlson has a knack for being brutally honest. When you're unafraid to speak your truth, you're bound to ruffle some feathers. Carlson's brand of unfiltered commentary has earned him respect and his fair share of critics.
Things have become, we're right in the middle of it, so it's hard to kind of see, the outlines. You're feeling your way through a dark room, but it feels like we reached the very apex of media concentration, and now it's becoming more diffuse. In other words, the internet, I mean, you're old enough, I remember vividly, the promise was diffusion, diversity, every voice is heard, every voice can hear, there's multiples of perspectives, you get to hear them all, and you get the news that you want. And that turned out to be the opposite of the truth, because the entire internet fell into the hands of a tiny group of like-minded people who crowded out dissenting voices. And that probably reached its peak, I'm hoping, in 2020. And now we're starting finally to see the hope of the internet fulfilled, which is that, people can say what they think. You can know what's going on in other countries in a way that you couldn't before. I mean, I hope that comes true. That really would be a good thing.
I'm from California. My family's from California. They're very proud of being from California. They never stopped talking about the state and how it was sort of the highest level of awesomeness. And if you didn't live here, you were unfortunate. And everything about California is better than every other place, from our schools to our infrastructure to our people, best-looking women, best food.
Thinking of investing but don't know where to start? Whether it's crypto, forex, or stocks, we've got the best broker for you. Click the links in the description and make a deposit to claim your bonus.
Everything about California was the best. I mean, that I marinated in that, and you probably did too if you grew up here. Like, this was the greatest place. And then I left and I went to school on the East Coast and I moved to Washington. I got caught up in that and journalism. But I would come back to California, obviously, a lot. And I watched the state change just profoundly, and not just politically. In fact, that was the least interesting change that I watched. I saw it change demographically, but mostly I saw it change economically. And it became a place where normal people just couldn't really thrive. And the whole point of California was, this is where, everyone from the Midwest who had some ambition and wanted a better life and better weather, but really wanted to kind of become a new person, moved. So it was a really promising place. And I watched it become a place where if you weren't like legitimately rich, you actually kind of couldn't live here unless you were legitimately poor, in which case you could. And so what about everybody else? And so I go to places like, Boise or Scottsdale or Jackson or, all the kind of Portland, contiguous or near contiguous cities in the American West, and they're filled with Californians.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wait, this is an inversion of what I grew up with, what I expected. Like, they're all leaving. I mean, a lot of people I know stay because it's like such a great place and they're so insulated from the problems. But like, if you're not making real money and you have children, like, you have to leave. And that's Latin America. It's not Latin America demographically. It's not a racial observation. That's the Latin American economy. That's Latin American culture, where a small number of, caudillos run everything and everyone else is a peasant. There's no middle class. I hate that.
You talk to these guys who spend a long time in prison and they can't wait to get out and see the trees and feel the air in their cheeks and get laid and all that stuff. And then they get out and they sort of miss the order and the routine and just the security of having someone do everything for you in a regular, reliable way. And I sort of felt that way. I mean, I've been in cable news pretty much consistently since 1995. So, that we're approaching 30 years, and that's a long time. I had complaints about it. I didn't really have that many complaints about Fox. Actually, they're always nice to me and let me say what I wanted. But just in general, working for a big company is suboptimal in a lot of ways. And then the second I get out, I'm like, I don't know if I would have gotten out voluntarily, honestly, because inertia, but I got fired. And I immediately thought, well, this is going to be a blessing. I just knew it. And my wife felt strongly that it would be a blessing.
Uncovering hidden agendas and motives that often elude the public eye, Carlson constantly receives backlash and criticism. Refusing to bend to herd mentality and hope on the bandwagon, Carlson stands rigid in unwavering truth, unafraid of being left behind or canceled. Steadfast in his values and beliefs, he digs deep, exposing what's hidden behind closed doors.
My dad was also a journalist, so I grew up in it. That's why I did it, because I really admired my father and I thought he had the most interesting possible life, and he did. And he was surrounded by the most interesting possible people, curious, literate people, great people, fun people. And so I went into it, with very high hopes. And by the way, those have been exceeded. I have had a really interesting life. I've been, everywhere and met everyone I wanted to meet, and I've just derived so much from it. But the change has been complete. I mean, it's not the same business that it was when I got into it. And the reason's really simple. It was rotted from the core by partisan politics, which is a virus. So I was always ideological. I always had really strong beliefs about various things. I was never shy about it. I was also not very judgmental about people who disagreed with me, because I didn't need to be, because my political views were never the most important thing about me. I never thought they were. I had a family, I've got religious faith, I love my dogs, and I have a lot of hobbies. I love to hunt and fish or whatever. Those are also parts of who I am, as they are for everybody. People are multidimensional. But over time, as religion kind of receded from people's lives, which it did, it was a pretty religious country in 1991 when I started. It's a very secular country now. Politics filled that void. And so political affiliation, not ideological alignment at all, nothing to do with ideas, but just the team sport of partisan politics replaced religion, and all of a sudden it became impossible to be honest about anything because you don't want to betray your own team. And I remember thinking when I was a kid, not a kid, but in my 20s, and I was covering like Al Sharpton, who I secretly do kind of like, I'll admit it, because I think he's smart and funny and he's interesting. But Al Sharpton is obviously a very corrupt guy, okay? And I would always think, like, how can he declare himself leader of black people in America? Like, why doesn't anyone, because he's not, but why doesn't someone stand up, like a black person stand up and say, you're not my leader? Like, what? Who are you? Who made you boss? And I realized over time that a lot of African Americans in our country feel under attack. That's real. And so nobody wanted to criticize Al Sharpton. Like in private, they'd be like, oh, he's a buffoon, or, what's with the hair? You know what I mean? The gold medallions. But no one wanted to attack him in public because that would be betraying the team. If you're in D.C., you feel like, well, the country's like doing great. And then you drive from D.C. to like Pittsburgh, pick a city, and take a 4-hour drive in any direction, and you pass through towns of like 10,000 people with no car dealership because it went out of business, where like the majority of grown men do not have full-time jobs, where 30% of them are daily taking some kind of painkiller on disability. It's actually a disaster. It's like free fall culturally. And there are a lot of reasons for that, and I'm not sure I understand. I'm not an intellectual. I'm a talk show host, so I don't fully understand everything that's going on, but I know disaster when I see it, and no one seems to even acknowledge it. It's like, what you were saying before we went on the air. You should take a camera crew up and drive around parts of the valley that, like, I grew up knowing, right, because I'm from here, and I think of them as sort of stable, normal, middle-class places. Multiracial, by the way. It's not a race thing. It's just like Normal people live there, and now they're covered in graffiti and filth and gangs. People don't understand the extent to which huge parts of the country have slipped into something really ugly in third world. They don't even know. And that is what drives me freaking crazy. I remember when I was a magazine writer for a number of years in the 90s, and I would have a story due every Friday morning, just a magazine piece, 2,500 words. Not that hard, but sort of hard. And so I would always stay up all night Thursday writing it. I'd report it all week, write it Thursday night. And then Friday morning, I'd just be like in a lather, chain smoking in my basement, trying to get this thing filed. My editors would be calling, yeah, we need to get this to the printer. It was intense for me, in my 20s. And it was at that moment that I'd be like, maybe I should rearrange my bookshelf by author, or maybe by title. I would become like completely obsessed with something unrelated to the big question, which is, are you going to finish the freaking magazine piece or not? And it was a window into people's most basic defense mechanism, which is to look away from this thing. They can't face it. Or when I was a police reporter, you would interview these people, always the same story. I'm coming out of Dillard's, in downtown Little Rock, and I thought they were fireworks or a car backfiring. And it's like, no, it's not the 4th of July. Cars don't backfire anymore. If you hear that sound, it's gunfire. And everyone knows that, but nobody in the moment can face the horrifying fact of gunfire. So they always explain it away as something else. And to me, that was a metaphor for the way people naturally are. It's like, this isn't happening. Clearly, there's some other explanation that's less sinister than what is obvious. But, there isn't. What's obviously happening is the thing that's happening. Right. It's really hard for people to metabolize that, I think. To see a leader, a real leader at the helm of an institution that matters, that has the kind of throw weight that Heritage does, was absolutely thrilling for me. Because the story of the last decade is the collapse of leadership, not of the population. The people remain noble and decent, so far as I can tell. I still live here, I'm never leaving. We have good people, we have terrible people in charge. And not just of our government, but of the institutions that I grew up in, the Episcopal Church, my high school. I could just go on and on and on. They're all run by weak people. And, it's the same in marriage. Weak husband causes angry wife. Weak leaders cause an angry country. That's true. And to see someone who's not a weak leader at the helm of Heritage just thrilled me.
If you're in the same business and you feel like you've sort of done what you set out to do, you're like, I don't really need to impress anybody at this point. I'm not, in debt. Speaking for myself, I'm not rich. I will never be rich. I'm pretty sure of that. But I'm not in hock to anybody. I don't owe anybody anything. And my kids are grown. So it's like, why would I ever lie? I'm just in a different place. And so you can't, it's not that I lied intentionally before. I mean it. I didn't. I never have been in favor of lying. However, I think I did not allow myself to think certain things because they were just too counter narrative. They were like, everybody I knew, the world I lived in Northwest DC, like everyone works either directly for the government or is a parasite on government effectively, including people I love and know really well. And the media is too, by the way. The media is reporting on government, but it's also dependent on government.
People who are telling the truth are calm. They don't wave their hands around and make wild accusations. They don't need to do that. It's enough to say what they know. And if honest people turn out to be wrong about something they have claimed, they'll admit it. They don't double down on false. They made a mistake, and that's okay. It's not like they're claiming to be God. Liars behave differently. Liars are touchy, sometimes to the point of hysteria. They're hiding something. That's the whole point of lying. And they're worried you're going to find out what it is. Liars are fragile because over time, lying makes you weak and afraid. It has the same effect on countries, by the way. We're living through one of those clarifying moments, which actually we're thankful for, where we're learning exactly who the liars are. 3 of the most important claims our leaders have made about that day were untrue. Their claims were lies. We were not shocked to discover that. We knew there was a reason the congressional leaders had been hiding the tape and that reporters in Washington weren't demanding to see it. They were lying to us, obviously. That's why you hide things. But what was actually surprising, what we can't quite get over even now, is how they responded when they were caught lying. They didn't seem embarrassed. They didn't apologize. They weren't even curious to learn more about what actually happened on January 6th. Let's see the tape. No, they didn't want to see it. They exploded in rage. And then, as liars tend to do, they doubled down. They told the same lies they've been caught telling, but with even greater aggression this time. "Shut up, it's midnight," they said as the sun rose behind them. Who acts like that? Well, sociopaths do. And in this case, the sociopaths turned out to be both Democrats and Republicans. The commitment to lying in Washington is far deeper and more bipartisan even than we realize when we follow this stuff for a living. Now, you sometimes hear people say that the whole partisan system is an illusion and that underneath the manufactured debates, the leaders on both sides are in fact secretly united in a common love of money and power and the deception required to get them. And honestly, we could never really bring ourselves to believe that. It's just too dark. But now we do believe it because we have seen it. Consider the death of police officer Brian Sicknick. Now, we still don't know exactly how Officer Sicknick died. We're not certain that anyone does know. No one has explained it. But after reviewing the previously withheld video evidence, we can tell you with certainty that Officer Sicknick was not beaten to death by Trump voters at the Capitol. The tape shows very clearly Brian Sicknick walking through the building in apparent health after the media told us for 2 years that he had been murdered. So they were wrong about that. Okay, they got caught. Here's the interesting thing, they won't admit it. The people in charge of history are liars. Liars. And lying is bad. And on a national scale, it's deadly. It's corrosive of everything that is good in the country, including trust and your grasp on reality itself. And that's why they try to make you lie. Men can become women. Climate change is an existential threat, or whatever the lie is they're making you tell. They don't believe it. They know you don't believe it. But by forcing you to repeat it, they degrade and control you. They make you less of a person. Sometimes you wonder just how filthy and dishonest our news media are. You'll be in the shower and you'll think they're bad, but how bad are they? Well, here's one measure of their badness. You can try this at home. Ask yourself, is any news organization you know of so corrupt that it's willing to hurt you on behalf of its biggest advertisers? Anyone who do that is obviously Pablo Escobar level corrupt and should not be trusted. What would that look like? That level of corruption. Well, imagine that the Trump administration had made it mandatory for American citizens to buy MyPillow. That's one of Fox News' biggest advertisers. Imagine the administration declared that if you didn't rush out and buy at least one MyPillow and then at least another booster pillow, you would not be allowed to eat out. You couldn't re-enter your own country. You couldn't have a paying job. MyPillow, they told you with a straight face, was the very linchpin of our country's public health system. Now imagine as they told you that Fox, as a news organization, endorsed it, amplified the government's message. Imagine if Fox News attacked anyone who refused to buy MyPillow as an ally of Russia, as an enemy of science. And then imagine that Fox kept up those libelous attacks even as evidence mounted that MyPillow caused heart attacks, fertility problems, and death. If Fox News did that, what would you think of Fox News? Would you trust us? Of course you wouldn't. You would know that we were liars. Thank heaven Fox News never did anything like that, but the other channels did. The other channels took hundreds of millions of dollars from big pharma companies, and then they shilled for their sketchy products on the air. And as they did that, they maligned anyone who was skeptical of those products. At the very least, this was a moral crime. It was disgusting, but it was universal. It happened across the American news media. They all did it. So at this point, the question isn't who in public life is corrupt. You realize that the herd instinct is maybe the strongest instinct. I mean, it may be stronger than the hunger and sex instincts, actually. The instinct, which again is inherent to be like everybody else and not to be cast out of the group, not to be shunned, that's a very strong impulse in all of us from birth. And it takes over, unfortunately, in moments like this, and it's harnessed, in fact, by bad people in moments like this to produce uniformity. And you see people going along with this, and you lose respect for them. And that's certainly happened to me at scale over the past 3 years. I'm not mad at people, I'm just sad and disappointed. How could you go along with this? You know it's not true, but you're saying it anyway? Really, you're putting your pronouns in your email? You're ridiculous. You know, but no one else thinks it's ridiculous. Oh no, it's your pronouns in the email. What does that even mean? What does it even mean? You're saying things you can't define. LGBTQIA+? Who's the plus? The plus is invited to my show anytime. Find a plus and I'll interview him. What's it like to be a plus? Am I a plus? I'm serious. I feel like I'm an addition. Does that make me a plus? No one even knows what it is. And the whole society, LGBTQIA+. All right. What's the plus? Oh, shut up. Racist. Okay. So you reach that place and you feel, and this is one of the reasons, Father Scalia, I was actually overcome a little bit with emotion as you prayed, because I realized that I was so upset by the behavior of some people I love, frankly, in a country I revere and always have, that I wasn't praying for the country. That's on me.
Ready to dive into the world of trading and investing? Discover platforms for crypto, Forex, and stocks at your fingertips. Click the links in the description and make a deposit to claim your bonus.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm from there, and I know how this works. I spent, again, my whole life around it. So that's real. I'm not accusing them of killing Kennedy. I'm just telling you there are members of Congress who were controlled by the intel agencies, and that's a fact. And I just think that that's completely incompatible with a free society or with a democracy. And I don't know why nobody ever says it. People feel more than they understand about everything, from love to foreign policy, politics to finance. We just feel things. And I'm not sure we ever understand anything very well, just in general. So I don't think the people in charge of the current system understand a lot about themselves or the system they run. But they can feel that there's real change, there's real volatility in the air, and they're really afraid. And that's why they're being so hysterical. I mean, there's this amazing tape, which I think about all the time, of Nicolae Ceausescu and his wife, Elena. In 1990, they ran Romania, and they're really pretty brutal Stalinist-type dictators. And there was a revolution there, and they got put before a very hastily brought together tribunal, and they were convicted of crimes, and they were executed. And there's video of them walking out to the courtyard about to be shot to death, which they were, like 10 seconds after the video was shot. And as they're being dragged out, they're issuing orders to the people who are about to execute them. They can't fully accept the fact that they have no power and that the old way is ending and a new way is coming. So what's their gut reaction? To double down on their efforts to control everything around them. And as we said at the outset, well, I think we agree on this on a deep level, the core mistake people make is thinking that they can control everything, not recognizing the limits of their own power and wisdom and foresight, ability to see into the future. They don't recognize those limits in themselves. And that's why they get way over their skis and destroy everything. And so I think the people in charge are seized by hubris. They think that they've got some complex plan for making the world better and themselves richer by defeating Putin. Okay. But it's not really working, and they kind of feel it's not working, and they also feel like the whole population hates them, and they're right. And so they're in this defensive crouch, and that's why they're so hysterical about everything. That's why they got so up in your face. Like in a healthy system, even 20 years ago, you see the sadness happening. But there is, as there always is, this is a fact of nature and theology and of observable reality, there is a countervailing force at work always. There's a counterbalance to the badness. It's called goodness. And you see it in people. So for every 10 people who are putting he and him in their electronic JP Morgan email signatures, there's one person who's like, no, I'm not doing that. Sorry, I don't want to fight, but I'm not doing that. It's a betrayal of what I think is true. It's a betrayal of my conscience, of my faith, of my sense of myself, of my dignity as a human being, of my autonomy. I am not a slave. I am a free citizen, and I'm not doing that. And there's nothing you can do to me to make me do it. And I hope it won't come to that. But if it does come to that, here I am. Here I am. It's Paul on trial. Here I am. And you see that in people, and it's a completely unexpected assortment of people. I'm really interested in cause and effect, and as I noted at the outset of my remarks, and my ability to predict the future, working on that. But because I'm sort of paid to predict things, I try and think a lot about, what connects certain outcomes that I should have seen before they occurred. And in this case, there is no thread that I can find that connects all of the people who've popped up in my life to be that lone brave person in the crowd who says, no, thank you. You could not have known who these people are. They don't fit a common profile. Some are people like me. Some of them don't look like me at all. Some of them are people I despised on political grounds just a few years ago. I could name their names, but you may not even know about their transformations. I don't want to wreck your dinner by telling you who they are. But there is in one case someone who I made fun of on television and certainly in my private life in vulgar ways, who was really the embodiment of everything I found repulsive, who in the middle of COVID decided, no, I'm not going along with this. And once you say one true thing and stick with it, all kinds of other true things occur to you. The truth is contagious. Lying is, but the truth is as well. And the second you decide to tell the truth about something, you are filled with this, I don't want to get supernatural on you, but you are filled with this power from somewhere else. Try it. Tell the truth about something. You feel it every day. The more you tell the truth, the stronger you become. That's completely real. It's measurable in the way that you feel. And of course, the opposite is also true. The more you lie, the weaker and more terrified you become. We all know that feeling. You lie about something and all of a sudden you're a prisoner of that lie. You are diminished by it. You are weak and afraid. Drug and alcohol use is the same way. It makes you weak and afraid. But you look around and you see these people, and some of them really have paid a heavy price for telling the truth. And they are cast out of their groups, whatever those groups are, but they do it anyway. And I look on at those people with the deepest possible admiration. I am paid to do that. I face no penalty. Someone came up to me, you're so brave. Really? I'm a talk show host. It's not gonna get him any opinion I want. That's my job. That's why they pay me. It's not brave to tell the truth on a cable news show. And if you're not doing that, you're really an idiot. You're really craven. You're lying on television. Why would you do that? You're literally making a living to say what you think, and you can't even do that.
So if you're worried about our politics getting like even more vicious than it already is, and people being hurt in our politics, which is entirely possible, you should be worried about the prospect of an open war. We're already at war with Russia, of course. We're funding their enemies. So we're fighting Russia, but I mean an open battle with Russia where we say we're at war with Russia. I think that could easily happen. I think we could Tonkin Gulf our way into it, where all of a sudden missiles land in Poland. The Russians did it. Our NATO allies been attacked. We're going to war. I could see that happening very easily. So if you're worried about that, you need to put as much pressure as you possibly can on the Republican-held Senate to force a peace, which can be done. The United States could force a peace in Ukraine tonight. We're funding one side. There is no Ukrainian army outside of NATO. If NATO withdrew its support for Ukraine, Ukraine would crumble in a day. So we are the only power in the world that can bring both sides to the table to force a peace, which will be unsatisfactory as all forced peaces are. Like each side will give more than it wants, but that's the only option. Otherwise, I would bet my house on it. We are going to war with Russia. And of course, the stakes are everything, our life on the planet. I mean, these are the two biggest nuclear arsenals in the world facing off against each other. So like, this is insane. They're insane. These are people who think men can become women, who believe that face masks save you from COVID. I mean, these are not rational people. Would they go to war with Russia? Of course they would. Again, they want to anyway. And I don't know why Republicans don't get this at all, but they don't seem to get it. And meanwhile, Republican leaders, and Mitch McConnell's senile too, so I don't even blame him, but all the stupid Republican senators and McCarthy in the House, I mean, it's pathetic. These people are all on board with the war against Russia. Their view of Russia is very, and I can say this as someone who was, against the Soviets when it mattered, when they existed. But I'm maybe the only person in the United States who doesn't really have very strong feelings about Russia. I'm not that interested in Russia. I don't see it as our enemy or ally. I just don't have strong emotions about Russia. So I look at this and I see true hysteria. Like they've convinced themselves that our global enemy is Russia. And I really think they mean that. And certainly the Republicans mean it. The Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, the low IQ wing of the Republican Party, which is most of the Republican Party, is low IQ at the leadership level. They all think that and they mean it. And like someone needs to slap them awake. You're leading this country to its destruction. We've already lost control of the world. The American empire's in free fall right now, and we're going to lose the US dollar. And when that happens, we're going to have real poverty here, like Great Depression level poverty. And it comes from this war. And I don't understand why no one else can see this, but it's super obvious once you leave. You go spend a week in Europe and talk to smart people on both sides. Like, it doesn't matter what their politics are, and ask them, like, what effect do you think the war in Ukraine has had on American leadership in Europe? Dude, and by the way, Western Europe is our only reliable ally in the world. We only have one real ally, and that's Western Europe. And Western Europe is being destroyed by this. The German economy was crushed when the Biden administration blew up Nord Stream. I know nobody cares, but if you think like long-term about this, they're really kicking the legs out from under this country in a way that is not possible to repair, at least in the short term.
I lived in Washington from the age of 15 until now. It's a half-black city, and it's got the same numbers as every other inner city. You know, a lot of affluent black families, but the majority live in the conditions we used to call inner city blight, you know, where like no one has a father. That I actually thought, everyone thought this was like specific to a culture, right? Rural America now has the same problems. Where do the problems come from? Well, part of them comes from a really simple fact. When men make less than women, women don't want to marry them. Families are not formed. There's a ton of social science on this. Women don't, I mean, there's many exceptions to this, obviously, but in general, over big populations, women do not want to marry men who make less or who are shorter. And so when men overall make less than women, I know the goal is to make sure that women make more than men, but when that actually happens, as it has in a lot of parts of rural America, it's true in inner city black America in a lot of places, in most places, you don't get marriage. You still get kids being born because people are driven to procreate, but the families are not formed. And then this cycle begins with like utterly predictable results. So it's actually not a race thing in a lot of ways.
Well, it's not a race thing.
What if you had a whole
nature.
party whose success was like based on the existence of single moms with kids? Like where actually a huge part of the electoral base was broken families. Like you had to have those families broken in order to win elections. You would have a huge incentive to continue this garbage and to wreck your whole country. I mean, that's not all that's going on, but that's part of it. When was the last time you heard an I'm not being, there are a lot of Democrats like in real life care about this issue and they're good people. But among the political class and the Democratic Party, when was the last time you heard someone say, all things being equal, many exceptions, of course, but in general, it's better to have kids, especially boys, grow up with a biological father at home? Can they say that? They cannot say that. They're not allowed to say that, even though there's no dispute about it. Among anyone who looks at it for 5 minutes at the numbers, there's no dispute. They cannot say that.
No one's really in favor of bombing Syria, okay? And so we can't allow dissent because we're too weak. They know how weak they are. I guess that's the point I'm making. They know how weak they are, and they're getting hysterical about it. And I get it. That's an understandable response. It's a human response, but it's the least wise thing you can do. It really is. Like when your kids become teenagers, there's always this moment where you catch one smoking weed and you realize that like you've reached your limit as a parent. Like you didn't want them to smoke weed. They did it anyway. You're not really in control. And like, how do you respond? Do you flip out and punch the kid in the face? No. Not unless you want the kid to become a heroin addict and destroy your relationship with the kid,
Yeah.
You have to accept something about yourself, which is you're not fully in charge of this child anymore. When the kid was 5, you were. The kid's 15, now you're not, and you have to accept that. They can't accept that.
We have a happy life. I mean, the center of our family is really strong, which is to say, my wife and I are happy with each other and we're happy with our children. And I think they're happy with us. We have 4 dogs. I think they're definitely happy with us. So, and we have a lot of really close friends. I mean, you definitely find out who your friends are, and we have like real friends, and we don't go out, we don't go places that much. And so we have people stay with us a lot. We always have house guests, always have one this afternoon. And so like I think our relationships with other people are deep and deeply satisfying. So that's kind of everything right there. So the rest of it is, so I feel like I'm playing with house money. I mean, I don't really care at this point. My kids are all grown and they're thriving, and I'm just not, if I don't live to 80, no one's going to cry about it. So I guess the only thing I would say that I have learned, so I've always thought that. I've always thought, the people around you in your immediate vicinity are the most important. That's your whole life, is the people right there. Your coworkers, your friends, your neighbors, the waitress at the restaurant. Like if you gyp the waitress on a tip, I don't care how much you yap about effective altruism. Like, you're a phony. Like, your duty, I think, as a humane person, is to help the people right in your path. I've always thought that. So anyway, I've always thought that my views have not changed. The one thing that really has changed in the way I live is I really try and succeed every day to have like at least 20 minutes of silence. I take a sauna every single day, 7 days a week. I love the sauna. You know, I grew up taking saunas just because Scandinavian thing, but I also value it now, not just for its physical effects, but for the stillness and the calm, for the reflection and the prayer, and then nighttime reading. You know, it's very hard to read books with the iPhone because there's always the demand of text. I turn all my alerts off on the text. When I want to text, I pick up my phone, it's not beeping or buzzing, and I can do my text, and that's great. And I do hours a day of text, and that's fine. It's great, actually, but that can't crowd out the quiet time and the time where I'm actually learning something new. And so I'm pretty intentional about the books that I read. My wife is a fanatical reader, and so there's always, you know, she's always reading a book, so it's easier for me to join her in that, and I do. But without that time to just think or just listen, I still don't know what's going on. I'm still confused by what's happening in our world. Like all the threads have not connected in my head. Like I don't pretend to know what all of this really means or where it's going, because I don't know. But I would have no freaking clue if I didn't spend a little bit of time every day just not being distracted. We're too distracted. I'll speak for myself. I am too distracted. Too much stuff coming at me all the time. And that is not the path to wisdom. Yeah. And if you're ever around someone who's wise, I don't mean smart. Nobody remembers the quants. Nobody cares how many details or facts you have. What does it mean? Where is it going? What should I do? What's my response? You know, those are the questions that people care about, that I care about, I think. And to answer those questions, we go to wise people. And the one thing we know about wise people is they're not distracted. They're wholly in the moment. They're experiencing things. They're allowing themselves to experience things and let those things settle. So quiet, fresh air, nature, those are prerequisites for wisdom, in my opinion. And I've always known that, I guess, but in the past 5 or 6, 7 years, I've really become more rigorous. Most of my day I spend doing frivolous bullshit on my iPhone, but not all day, because if I did that, I would be at sea.
Weak men are vicious men, and these are weak men whose attitudes towards an individual whose life has been destroyed on the basis of false and withheld evidence is vicious. Oh, we cherry-picked. Really? What they're saying, ironically, what they're describing, ironically, is exactly what the January 6th committee and the prosecutors in these cases did for 2 years. They selectively picked small segments of tape to convince Americans that January 6th was something that it wasn't. It was awful. We would not defend that. We hate vandalism. We hate assault. Was it a violent insurrection? It was not. Was it a killing of 5 officers in the Capitol? It was not. Those are lies, and they buried tape that contradicted and revealed those lies. So all we did was play the tape that they had been hiding for 26 months and show that there were American citizens, Jacob Chansley specifically, and others whose civil liberties were annihilated. And you can make your own rational judgments about what that means. Do you want to live in a country where that's possible? They don't care. Neither party in Washington cares. Well, the very first thing you should do every single day is tell all the people you love that you love them. For 2 reasons. Because you do, and affirming things out loud makes them real. Words are the most important and most powerful thing that we have. And of course, I have an interest in saying that. If I sold Chryslers, I'd be like, cars are the most important thing. But words are, in the beginning was the word, and so articulate it. And that is also simultaneously an acknowledgement of a truth that we don't face, which is we don't know what's going to happen today. And we could die. That's the one thing that unites every person, is the certainty of death. And reminding yourself of that every single day will bring you, paradoxically, joy. I love you. That's the most important thing.